Jason had been working the fields for hours. The sun was high in the sky, beating down relentlessly on his back. As he guided the plow through the soil in the distance, he saw a strange shape lying motionless on the ground. At first, he thought it was some kind of debris or fallen tree. But as he approached, his heart began to race. It was massive, its scales shimmering like polished metal in the sunlight. Its wings were spread wide, one of them torn and bloody. The creature was unlike anything he had ever seen, and its body was unlike any animal on Earth. The deep hum of its breathing told him it was still alive. Jason hesitated for a moment. He wasn't sure what to do. He had never seen anything like this before. But he couldn't just leave it there. It was wounded and in pain, so he made a decision. He would help. Cautiously, Jason approached the creature, kneeling beside it, his fingers trembling as he touched the creature's scales. They were warm to the touch, and the softness beneath them made him wonder how something so large could seem so fragile. He looked around, but there was no one in sight. No one would be able to help him with this. There were no roads for miles, no sign of any kind of civilization, just his small farm and the endless fields surrounding it. Jason knew he couldn't leave the creature out here to die. It would be his responsibility to take care of it. With great effort, he managed to drag the wounded dragon into his barn and carefully laid it down on the hay. Jason wasn't sure how to treat the creature's injuries. He had no knowledge of alien biology, no experience with creatures like this. But instinctively he began to work. He found some old medical supplies he had used on his livestock and started to clean the dragon's wounds. He winced as he applied the antiseptic to its broken wing. The dragon let out a low growl, but didn't attack him. Instead, it closed its eyes as if understanding that he meant no harm. The barn was quiet except for the occasional rustling of the creature's scales and the soft breaths it took. Jason worked through the night applying bandages and trying to make the dragon comfortable. All the while his mind raced with questions. Who was this creature? Where had it come from? How had it ended up here? And most importantly, what did it want? As the hours passed, the dragon began to show signs of life. Its breathing steadied, and its body no longer trembled. It was still unconscious, but Jason noticed its eyes flickering beneath its closed eyelids. The intensity of the creature's presence filled the barn. He could feel something strange in the air, a sort of energy around it that he couldn't explain. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was no longer just a farmer on a quiet planet. He had found something that had come from somewhere else, and it had found him for some reason. Jason wasn't sure why, but he had the strangest feeling that his life was about to change forever, that the dragon's arrival was just the beginning of something much bigger. Jason sat on a pile of hay staring at the dragon as it lay there breathing softly. The barn was quiet save for the occasional rustle of the creature's wings, shifting slightly under the weight of the bandages he had applied. He had never been so close to something so alien before. Its scales glistened in the dim light of the barn, its eyes closed in a deep sleep. But there was something about its presence that unnerved him. He wasn't sure if it was the sheer size of the creature or the overwhelming energy that seemed to radiate from it. Either way, he couldn't deny that his curiosity was growing stronger by the minute. He had always thought of himself as a simple man, someone who worked the land and lived in peace away from the noise of the world. But now, as he looked at the dragon, something inside him stirred a feeling he couldn't name. He had always been alone on the farm. He had never married, and his family was far away. But he had never felt lonely until now. It was as if this creature had brought something into his life, something he didn't understand, but could no longer ignore. The dragon stirred suddenly, its wings fluttering slightly as if testing the air. Its eyes slowly opened, glowing with a golden light that seemed to pierce through the dim barn. Jason froze, his breath catching in his throat. The creature's gaze locked onto his with an intelligence that was unmistakable, but it didn't move. Instead, it simply watched him, as if sizing him up. Jason wasn't sure what to do. His instincts told him to run, but he stayed rooted to the spot. He knew he had made a choice. When he decided to help the creature, he couldn't turn back now. To his surprise, the dragon didn't lash out. It didn't make any aggressive move at all. It simply stared at him, its eyes narrowing, as if trying to understand him. Jason swallowed hard and spoke softly, not sure what to say at first. Are you all right?" he asked, unsure if the creature could understand him. The dragon let out a low rumble, almost like a sigh. Its body shifted slightly as it adjusted itself on the hay. Jason noticed that the creature's breathing had become steadier. It seemed less frantic, less wild, but still there was something unsettling in the way it looked at him. He took a step closer, watching the dragon's eyes warily. He reached out a hand towards its injured wing, hoping to reassure it. But the moment his hand made contact, the dragon's body tensed. Its golden eyes flared with a strange light, and a voice echoed in his mind. It wasn't spoken out loud, but Jason could hear it, as clear as if the words were coming from inside his own head. "I am Khael." Jason jerked back, his heart pounding in his chest. He had heard no sound, but the voice had been unmistakable, and the words lingered in his mind long after they had been spoken. Khael, he thought to himself. The name felt ancient, powerful, as if it carried a weight beyond his understanding. I'm Jason," he replied almost instinctively, unsure of what else to say. He felt like he was in a dream, yet everything felt too real. The dragon, Khael, didn't respond at first, but then it moved its head slightly, its eyes watching him, with an intensity that made Jason feel like it could see through him, as if it knew everything about him without him saying a word. For the first time since it had arrived, Jason realized that this creature wasn't just some strange animal. It was something far beyond that, something that had come from a place and a time he could never imagine, and it was looking to him for help. And that was when Jason understood that his life had changed forever. He wasn't just taking care of an injured creature anymore. He was somehow connected to something much larger than anything he had ever known, something that could alter the course of everything he thought he understood. As the days passed, Jason found himself increasingly drawn to the dragon Khael, who seemed to grow stronger by the hour. Though it remained largely silent, it communicated with him through strange flashes of thoughts and images he could never fully comprehend. Sometimes he would see visions of faraway planets, of stars swirling in endless galaxies. Other times, Khael's memories would flicker in his mind, showing him glimpses of a great war between cosmic forces. He couldn't make sense of any of it, but one thing became clear: Khael was not just an animal. He was a being of immense power and history. Despite their growing bond, Jason remained cautious. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was in over his head. He was just a farmer with no real understanding of the world beyond his fields, and now he was responsible for an alien creature that could alter the very fabric of the universe. Still, he couldn't turn away from Khael. It was as if their fates were intertwined somehow. But with every passing day, Jason began to notice strange things happening around the farm: lights flickering in the distance at night, shadows moving in the corners of his vision. And then there were the animals. His cows and horses began acting strangely. They would stare at the barn for hours, their eyes wide with fear, and sometimes in the dead of night, he would hear the sound of something scratching at the walls of the barn, as if something was trying to break in. One morning, Jason woke to find the fields near the barn scorched, as if a fire had passed through them. But there was no sign of any flames. It was as if the earth itself had been burned by an invisible force. He tried to tell himself it was a freak accident, maybe lightning, but deep down he knew better. The most unsettling thing was the strange feeling in the air. It was a heavy sense of anticipation, as if something was coming, something he wasn't prepared for. Whenever he stepped outside, it was like the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Khael seemed to be aware of it too, though he didn't speak much. He would often look up to the sky, his golden eyes scanning the horizon with a sharpness that made Jason uneasy. And then there were the dreams at night, dreams of Khael soaring through space, of massive fleets of ships descending on Earth. And though Jason couldn't fully understand the meaning of these dreams, he couldn't ignore the growing sense of dread that accompanied them. One evening, as the sun began to set, Jason was walking back to the barn when he felt a sudden chill in the air. He stopped dead in his tracks, his heart racing. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. As he looked out across the fields, a small speck in the distance caught his eye, a dot moving fast toward the farm. At first he thought it might be another animal, but the closer it got, the more he realized it wasn't something natural. It was a ship, sleek and metallic, with strange markings across its surface. It moved silently through the sky, as if it didn't even need to use propulsion systems. Jason felt a wave of panic rise within him. This wasn't a normal ship. It was something far beyond anything humanity had ever built. And then he saw it. The ship was not alone. Dozens of others appeared from the clouds, and before he could react, the ground beneath his feet began to tremble. Jason's stomach dropped as he realized with sudden clarity that this was no random occurrence. The ships were here for Khael, and the reason they were coming was something far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. Khael's voice echoed in Jason's mind again, this time stronger than before. "They are here," he thought he heard the dragon say. "The fleet has arrived." Jason's blood ran cold as he turned back toward the barn, his eyes locked on Khael, who was standing at the entrance watching the sky with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. It was clear that whatever was coming, it was going to change everything. The ships hovered in the sky, casting long shadows across the land. Jason could feel the weight of their presence pressing down on him, as if the very air had thickened. The ground beneath him seemed to hum with the energy of something ancient and powerful. Khael stood motionless at the barn's entrance, his golden eyes locked on the sky, a low growl emanating from his throat, a sound unlike anything Jason had ever heard. It was not a warning, but a call, as if the dragon recognized the ships and knew exactly what they meant. Jason took a step back, his heart racing, his mind spinning with questions he had no answers to. Why were they here? What did they want with Khael? And most importantly, what did this mean for Earth? The dragon's voice echoed in his mind again. "You must understand, Jason. This is not just about me. This is about everything." Jason swallowed hard, trying to steady his breath. "What do you mean?" he asked, feeling the weight of the words as they left his mouth. "My people," Khael's voice reverberated within his mind. "We have watched your kind for centuries. We know what you are capable of. We know what you can become." Jason shook his head in disbelief. "What are you saying?" Khael turned his head slightly, his gaze softening, but there was a deep sadness in his eyes. "The ships that approach are not friendly. They are the last remnants of a dying empire. They seek to conquer worlds, to force them into submission. We have resisted for eons, but we are running out of time." Jason's stomach twisted as he tried to process the enormity of what Khael was saying. The dragon wasn't just some lost traveler. He was part of an entire race with a history tied to the fate of the galaxy, and now it seemed that humanity was caught in the middle. As if on cue, the ships descended from the clouds, their sleek hulls gleaming in the fading sunlight. Jason could feel the tremors beneath his feet growing stronger with each passing second. A sense of impending doom hung in the air. The barn seemed to close in around him, and he realized that the peaceful life he had once known was gone forever. Khael stepped forward, his wings stretching out behind him. He turned his head to Jason one last time before he spoke. "I must face them, Jason." Jason's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean you're going to fight them?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Khael's eyes locked onto his with an intensity that left Jason breathless. "I am not just a dragon, Jason. I am a prince of my kind. They will not stop until they have taken everything. I love everything. You love everything, you know." Jason's mind raced. There was so much at stake, so much he didn't understand. But one thing was certain: Khael wasn't just some creature from another world. He was a leader, a symbol of resistance, and now that symbol was being tested. "I can't let them do this to Earth." Khael's voice filled Jason's mind with a fierce determination. "I have to stop them, but I cannot do it alone." Jason stood still for a moment, the weight of Khael's words settling deep in his chest. The dragon was asking him to fight, to stand by his side, and protect Earth from an overwhelming force. Jason wasn't a soldier, he wasn't a hero, but the fear in Khael's eyes, the same fear that had been creeping into his own heart, made him realize that he couldn't walk away. He couldn't abandon this creature, this being who had shown him nothing but kindness. With a deep breath, Jason nodded slowly. "I'm with you, Khael," he said, his voice steady despite the panic rising in his chest. "We fight together." Khael lowered his head in a gesture of thanks, and together they faced the incoming fleet, knowing that the battle for Earth was about to begin. The fleet loomed overhead, its ships massive and imposing, each one casting an ominous shadow over the fields. As they descended, the ground shook beneath Jason's feet, the air crackling with energy that sent a chill down his spine. He looked at Khael, whose eyes were now glowing with an ethereal light, his body tense as he prepared for what was to come. Jason could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, his heart racing in his chest, his mind screaming for answers. But there were none. All he knew was that Khael was not just a creature he had helped, but a being of great power and significance, and that power was now their only hope. Jason turned to face the barn, gathering his courage. He had no idea how to fight an alien fleet, no idea what to do in a battle like this. But he knew one thing: he couldn't let the Drakari take Khael. He couldn't let them destroy everything he loved, everything he knew. Khael let out a low growl, his wings unfurling behind him. As he stepped forward into the open, the sky above was filled with the hum of the ships as they aligned themselves in a perfect formation, blocking out the sun. For a moment, the entire world seemed to go silent except for the pounding of Jason's heart. "They have come for me," Khael's voice echoed in Jason's mind, but there was no fear in it, only resolve. "But they will not take me without a fight." Jason stood by Khael's side, his mind spinning with questions and uncertainties. But one thing was clear: he couldn't back down now. The battle for Earth was not just Khael's fight, it was their fight together. The first ship broke away from the formation, its engines glowing with a strange energy as it shot toward the ground. The others followed suit like a swarm of deadly wasps, intent on descending upon the farm. Jason's pulse quickened as he watched the ships close in the air around them, charged with electricity, and the earth beneath his feet seemed to tremble in response. Without warning, the first ship released a barrage of energy blasts that ripped through the air with terrifying force. Jason ducked instinctively. As the ground exploded in front of him, the shockwave sent him tumbling to the dirt. But Khael was already moving, his massive wings beating the air as he launched himself into the sky, his body glowing with an intense light that made the entire area shimmer, as if the dragon itself was a beacon of power. Khael roared, a sound so loud and powerful that it seemed to shake the heavens, and with that roar came a blast of energy that shot from his mouth in a concentrated beam. The first ship exploded in a burst of flames, the debris scattering across the field as Khael turned his attention to the remaining ships. Jason's breath caught in his throat as he watched the dragon fight with a grace and fury he could never have imagined. Khael was not just defending himself, he was a force of nature, an elemental power unleashed upon the fleet. Jason couldn't tear his eyes away. The sheer strength of the dragon was beyond anything he had ever witnessed. But the fleet wasn't giving up. They responded with an onslaught of weapons fire from every ship, their beams of energy lighting up the sky as they tried to overwhelm Khael. Jason's heart raced as he saw the dragon falter for a moment, a beam striking his wing and sending him spiraling toward the ground. Khael crashed into the earth with a thunderous impact, the ground shaking beneath him as dust and debris flew into the air. Jason rushed to his side, fear rising in his chest, but Khael's golden eyes glowed brightly through the cloud of dust. "I am not finished yet, Jason," the dragon's voice rang in his mind with unwavering confidence. "This fight is far from over." Jason looked up to see the remaining ships circling above the farm, their weapons aimed directly at them. The battle had just begun, and he knew that the fate of Earth hung in the balance. But with Khael by his side, he refused to give up. He couldn't let them win. The air around Jason crackled with energy as the ships circled overhead, the sound of their engines deafening as they hovered above the wreckage of the farm. The ground was scorched and smoking from the barrage of blasts. The first ship had unleashed. Khael lay on the ground, his wings slightly bent, but his body still glowing with power. Jason rushed to his side, his heart pounding in his chest. "Khael, are you okay?" he shouted, but the dragon didn't answer. Instead, his golden eyes flashed as he struggled to push himself back to his feet. "I will not fall here, Jason." Khael's voice rang in his mind, filled with determination. "They will regret underestimating us." Jason didn't have time to respond as the next wave of ships unleashed their firepower. The ground erupted again, sending him tumbling to the dirt. He looked up to see the remaining ships charging their weapons and aiming directly at Khael. The energy building up in their cannons was visible like a storm ready to burst, and Jason could feel it too, the fear and uncertainty that weighed heavy in the air. But Khael was unshaken, his wings spread wide, as if preparing to take flight once again. The first blast hit Khael with incredible force, the shockwave knocking Jason backward. But the dragon didn't flinch. Instead, he opened his mouth and unleashed a burst of energy so powerful that it sent a shockwave through the air. The beams from the ships faltered for a moment as Khael's attack struck with pinpoint accuracy, taking out one of the ships with a single shot. But there were still dozens more. Jason's eyes widened as he saw them regroup, circling above, readying for another attack. But this time, Khael wasn't backing down. The dragon was more than just a survivor. He was a leader, a force of nature, and Jason realized in that moment that this wasn't just about defending the farm, it was about defending the planet. "Stay close to me, Jason." Khael's voice was calm, but filled with an energy that made Jason feel like he could face anything. Jason nodded, gripping a broken piece of wood for any semblance of a weapon. "I'm with you," he said through gritted teeth. The dragon lifted his head high and roared a mighty sound that echoed across the field with such force that the remaining ships hesitated for a moment, as if the very air had frozen. Khael's golden eyes gleamed with a fierce light, and with a sudden burst of speed, he shot into the sky, the air around him shimmering with power as he soared upward. Jason watched in awe as the dragon became a streak of light against the darkening sky. Khael was no longer just fighting for survival. He was fighting for everything. The ships above could never understand humanity's will to fight back. The dragon tore through the sky, his body leaving a trail of energy behind him as he dodged the beams from the ships and retaliated with blasts of his own. Jason could feel the ground tremble beneath him as the dragon's attacks intensified. Khael was moving faster now than he ever had before, each strike bringing down another ship in a fiery explosion. The remaining Drakari forces seemed to struggle against the ferocity of the dragon's onslaught, but they were relentless. They'd regrouped quickly and began to fire in unison. "They are not ready to give up." Khael's voice was strained but determined. "But neither am I." Jason stood tall even as the battlefield raged around him. He could see the sheer power Khael possessed, but it wasn't just the dragon's strength that kept him going. It was the bond they had formed, the knowledge that together they could face whatever came their way. Khael wasn't just a being from another world, he was Jason's ally, and the two of them were fighting side by side. With a fierce roar, Khael dove straight into the remaining fleet, his wings cutting through the air with incredible force. Jason watched as the dragon engaged in battle, not just for victory, but for a future where Earth could stand free from those who sought to conquer it. The fight was far from over, but in that moment, Jason knew they weren't going to give up without a fight. The battle in the sky raged on. Khael's attacks were precise and devastating, every strike sending a ship spiraling out of control in a fiery explosion. The ground beneath Jason's feet seemed to shake with each impact. He stood his ground despite the chaos around him, watching in awe as the dragon moved through the sky with a speed and power that defied belief. But the Drakari were not easily defeated. They regrouped and came at Khael from all directions, their weapons firing in a constant barrage. Jason could feel the tension in the air, the weight of the battle pressing down on him, but he refused to look away. The dragon's fight was his fight now too, and as much as he had wanted to remain a simple farmer, his destiny had been rewritten in the span of a few days. His life had collided with Khael's in a way he could never have imagined. Khael was slowing down. Jason could see the strain in his movements, the fierce golden glow of his scales flickering as the energy it took to keep up the assault began to drain him. But he wasn't stopping. The dragon pushed forward with the relentless determination of a warrior who had fought this battle for eons. Jason knew it was only a matter of time before the Drakari would adapt and strike back harder. "We must end this now, Jason." Khael's voice echoed in his mind, filled with urgency. "They are regrouping. We cannot let them have a chance to rally." Jason's heart pounded as he looked up to see the remaining ships positioning themselves for another coordinated strike. They were calculating their next move. Khael wasn't going to make it if he kept fighting at this pace, but Jason knew he couldn't stand idly by anymore. "What do we do?" Jason shouted over the roar of the battle, his voice filled with panic. "What can we do?" Khael's golden eyes locked onto him for a moment, and in that instant Jason understood the dragon's plan, a plan that would take everything Khael had left, but would end the battle once and for all. "I will need you, Jason," Khael said, his voice low but clear. "I can't do this alone." Jason's mind raced as he tried to process what Khael was asking. "What do you mean you need me?" he asked, his voice shaking. The dragon's wings beat powerfully as he ascended to the highest point in the sky, his voice becoming more urgent. "You must help me channel the energy of the earth." Jason's eyes widened as he realized what Khael was asking him to do. "Channel the energy," he repeated slowly. "Yes," Khael's voice was steady. "You have the power in you, Jason. It is in your connection to this world." Jason looked around at the landscape, the fields, the trees, the very earth beneath his feet, and something clicked inside him. He had always felt a deep connection to the land, but he had never understood it like this, never realized the power it held inside him. He looked back up at Khael, the dragon now a distant figure in the sky. "How do I do it?" Khael's golden eyes shone brightly from above. "Focus on the energy, Jason. Feel the heartbeat of the world. Draw it into yourself and release it with me." Jason closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sounds of the battle fade into the background. He felt the pulse of the earth beneath him, the rhythm of life itself, the wind in the trees, the beat of his own heart, and slowly he reached out with his mind, letting the connection to the planet flow through him. He could feel it building inside him, a power that was raw and ancient, something greater than anything he had ever experienced. With a shout of determination, Jason focused every ounce of energy into his hands, and as he did, the ground beneath him began to hum, the air crackled with power, and he could feel the earth itself responding to him, as if it recognized him as its vessel. "Now, Jason, now," Khael's voice thundered in his mind. With a roar, Jason released the energy in a powerful surge of light that shot toward the sky, a beam of pure energy that collided with Khael in a brilliant explosion, the combined force of their powers tearing through the remaining fleet with such ferocity that the ships had no chance to react. One by one, they were obliterated by the blast, the sky lighting up with the power of the earth and the dragon united. As the last ship fell from the sky, Jason stood panting in the field, his heart racing with adrenaline. The battle was over, but the weight of what had just happened settled heavily on his shoulders. He had helped Khael defeat the Drakari and saved Earth, but he knew that this was only the beginning. The dust settled across the field as the last remnants of the Drakari fleet fell to the ground, their massive ships burning as they crumbled into the earth. The sky was quiet now, save for the soft hum of the energy still pulsing through the air. Jason stood frozen, staring at the place where the ships had once hovered above him, his body shaking with exhaustion, but his mind racing as the enormity of what had just happened began to sink in. Khael descended slowly from the sky, his wings folding as he landed gently on the scorched earth. Beside Jason, the dragon's golden eyes still gleaming with a faint light, but there was no sign of the fierce energy that had once radiated from him. It was clear that the battle had taken a toll on him, too. The dragon's body was battered and bruised. Though he stood tall, there was a weariness in his movements. Jason swallowed hard, his throat dry. "We did it," he said, his voice shaky but filled with disbelief. "We actually did it." Khael's voice filled his mind once more, this time softer, more solemn. "Yes, Jason, we did, but the fight is far from over." Jason's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "The Drakari may have been defeated for now, but they are not the only ones who will come for me." Khael's voice was heavy with the weight of his words. "The empire I fled from is vast, and their pursuit of power knows no end." Jason looked up at the dragon's tired face, and for the first time he saw the full extent of what Khael had sacrificed. The battle had been brutal, but Khael had given everything to protect not just himself, but Earth and Jason couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude, mixed with fear of what would come next. "Are you saying they'll come back?" Jason asked, his voice tight with anxiety. "Yes," Khael's tone was resigned. "The Drakari were just the first wave. The real danger lies beyond them." Jason felt a chill crawl up his spine at the thought of an even greater threat coming for them, but he couldn't just sit back now, not after everything that had happened. "What do we do then?" he asked, his eyes locked onto Khael's. Khael paused for a long moment before answering, his eyes looking out across the horizon, as if weighing his next words carefully. "We must prepare, Jason. The fight for Earth is far from over." Jason's breath hitched at the thought of facing another war so soon after the last one, but something within him had changed in the days since Khael had first appeared on his farm. Something inside him had shifted. He had never imagined himself as a soldier or a hero, but he had stood by Khael and fought with him. And now he knew that he couldn't turn away from the dragon or the world he was trying to protect. "What do you need from me?" Jason asked, his voice firm, now a newfound resolve filling him. Khael met his gaze, his eyes glowing faintly. "We will need more than just strength. We will need allies, Jason." Jason nodded slowly, his mind racing with possibilities. Allies meant more than just fighting soldiers. It meant people who could stand with them, people who would believe in what Khael had come to represent. "How do we find them?" "I do not know yet," Khael admitted. "But together, we will find a way. We will build a resistance strong enough to face the empire that pursues me, and we will not let them destroy everything we have fought for." Jason stood in silence for a moment, processing everything Khael had said, and the weight of the responsibility now resting on his shoulders. But he knew deep down there was no turning back. This was his fight now too, and whatever came next, he would face it with the dragon by his side. "Then let's get to work," Jason said, his voice steady as he looked up at the sky, knowing that this was just the beginning of something far greater than he could have ever imagined. The days that followed were a blur of preparation as Jason and Khael worked tirelessly to ready themselves for the challenges ahead. The battle against the Drakari had ended, but the war was far from over. Jason had never imagined his life would lead him here, standing side by side with a dragon fighting for the survival of Earth. But now he couldn't imagine walking away. Khael had made it clear they needed allies, people who would stand beside them against the coming storm. Jason had seen the destruction the Drakari had caused, and he knew that Earth couldn't stand alone against a force that vast. But the question of where to start was a daunting one. The world was vast and fractured. How could they ever hope to unite it against a common enemy? "We must find those who understand the stakes," Khael's voice echoed in Jason's mind. "There are others out there who have the strength and will to fight, but they will not come willingly. We must earn their trust." Jason nodded even as his mind raced. He had no military experience, no political power. He was just a farmer, but that didn't matter anymore. He had seen what Khael was capable of, and now he knew that if he stood by the dragon's side, he could be part of something much bigger than himself. The first step was to seek out the resistance movements that had cropped up around the world, small groups of people who had fought back against forces they didn't fully understand, groups that had resisted the Drakari when they had come in secret. Their numbers were small, but their spirit was strong, and Jason knew that their will to fight would be invaluable. They traveled across continents, from the cities to the forests, seeking out the brave souls who had stood against the growing darkness. When the Drakari had first arrived, Jason marveled at the strength and resilience of the people they met. Each person had their own reason for fighting, but all of them shared a determination that filled Jason with hope. It wasn't easy convincing them to trust in Khael at first. There was skepticism and fear. The idea of a dragon being their ally seemed impossible, but Jason knew how to speak to them. He had once been like them, a simple man with no special talents or skills, who had been thrust into a battle he never asked for. Yet here he was fighting for the future of his world, and he knew that if he could show them his conviction, they would join their cause. "You must show them that we are not alone," Khael's voice guided him as they traveled from place to place. "They need to see that together we can make a difference." And slowly they began to gain traction. One by one, people joined their cause from the highest mountains to the deepest valleys. They came together, united by a common goal to protect their world from the impending darkness. But as the resistance grew, so did the weight of responsibility on Jason's shoulders. He had never asked to be a leader, yet here he was standing at the front of a movement that could change the fate of humanity. "I didn't expect any of this," Jason admitted one night, as he sat with Khael by a campfire, their faces lit by the flickering flames. "I never wanted to be anyone special." Khael's golden eyes shone softly in the firelight. "You are special, Jason. You are more than you know." Jason didn't know what the future held, but in that moment he understood one thing clearly: he wasn't alone. Khael wasn't alone. And together they would fight for Earth until the very end. The resistance had begun, and with it a new chapter in humanity's history was being written. The war against the Drakari Empire had only just begun, but Jason was ready for whatever came next.